And tell us where you're from. We always like to see blinking at me. I see. I'm coming over the screen, but I can't see the mic turn.
Okay, now we're good.
Okay. Does that mean am I live?
You live.
I am live. Oh, that reminds me of Charlie Hunter, one of our. If you haven't gone to visit Charlie Hunter's website on YouTube, give him a look because he is really one of the. Oh well, let me say it this way: he's an authentic human being as well as a wonderful artist. But he always opens up his live chats with "We're live, everybody." And they don't say everybody. Anyway, whatever he says. So I guess we're live. Had a little false start there, but that's okay. So I see folks have been just beginning to kind of come in slowly, and I'm going to rattle on for a little while until we can get. I always like to think of you as my class, because I was in the classroom teaching college for a good chunk of my life. So I'll just wait a little while, ramble on a little while, waiting for you to come in. But if you're a studio insider, go ahead and say hello to us. There's Maggie saying happy to see us and happy to see that you're here, Maggie. And that's Maggie reporting from Texas. So so while we're waiting for our people to gather together, I'm gonna give you a few little tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what's happening right now, what we're up to. And the first thing I want to tell you or to say again is that if you haven't visited our Substack page, I wish you'd give it a try, because Substack finally gives us the opportunity to have the archives of what we do, everything we do, available right there for you all the time. And the most recent stuff is on the page. It kind of looks like a magazine page, or maybe not exactly like a magazine cover, but anyway, on the front page, the most recent stuff that we've done. The most recent is featured at the top of the page, and then little columns to the right and to the left feature shows you stuff that was next to most recent. And so you're always current with what's going on in our world and what opportunities we're offering to you in the world of painting. All the things of painting that I think are just absolutely miraculous and important. So to get there, you go to, this is maybe a little hard to remember, and I can't think of a better way to do it. It's simply Dianne Mize, as one word, DIANNE-MIZE, DianneMize.substack.com, and there you can, we also have links to everything else there. I have links to the YouTube channel, and we have links to the Academy, and links to the lessons website. So everything's right there, and I always put all our announcements right there, everything that's coming up. The most important thing that's coming up right now is the workshop for October, which is going to be on October 22nd, and this one's going to be on the harmony of color. I think I call it keeping your paintings harmonious. Some things that let me say some new ways of thinking about the harmony of our paintings, and how we can make our paintings richer by being aware of how harmony works. And so the other thing is that always on our Academy, there's always a deal for you. There's always at least one course on the Academy at half price, and it's usually the most recent course, the most recent course that we've put up on the Academy. So you just have a couple more days now for the course that was featured in September. So we put in another new course up in October. And the Academy courses are really popular. People are really enjoying those. The courses themselves, the instruction is the same instruction that was given in a workshop. Usually I try to run those, pull those in as courses about 3 months after the workshop has run. So people who miss the workshop can always go to the Academy and get the course. So give those, go take a look at the Academy if you haven't already. That's simply DianneMizeAcademy.com. So there's that. And of course our regular stuff. And right now the most important thing is what we're doing in this YouTube chat. So there comes Mary Ellen and Jenny and Terry. So I hope some others of you are beginning to gather around for today's topic, which is, guess what? I bet you hadn't thought about shapes as having boundaries. And what is it about the boundaries of shapes that make them appear the way they do to your eyes? Have you ever thought about boundaries of shapes? I'm not just talking about just the outside edges of shapes. I'm talking about the shapes within shapes as well. So I think you're going to find that this may be, I hope this will be enlightening to you. Maybe a new kind of language, a new way to think about shapes and the way we use them in our paintings and the way we can use them to make our paintings do what we want them to do and put the emphasis where we want it to be. So I think maybe now, Roger, are you ready for the video?
I am.
All right. So what those of you who are joining us for the first time, the way we do this is I always have a little video prepared for you, and it's very, very short. But when you look at the video first, that introduces the concepts to you. And then after the video, we'll have a question and answer. The rest of the session will be composed of your questions and my answers and our little conversation together. So if Roger's ready, we're going to roll the video, and then I'll see you on the other side to take your questions. Okay, Roger, roller. Have you ever tried to define what a shape is? Try this. A shape is an area in space with a boundary. In painting, we call that boundary an edge. Too often, that's the one area of a shape that we take for granted, but in fact, it's the one characteristic of any shape that determines how our eyes see the shape. Let's examine that idea. There are two major things that determine how our eyes will see the boundary of a shape. One is the direction in which that boundary is moving, and the other is the characteristic of the edge of the boundary itself. A movement can only go straight or in a curve or a combination of straight and curve. Its direction can be vertical, horizontal, or diagonal, or a combination of these. And we know we have numerous diagonals between verticals and horizontals. Now here's something that's very important. When we're painting or drawing, rather than thinking about trying to get that image to look like you see it, switch your attention to the direction in which it's going and the kind of movement. So we're looking for curves and straight. We're looking for vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. And here's how it would go. If I'm taking this shape, the boundary of this shape, it starts about right here. Now this shape is behind it. So let's start right here with this shape. The direction that it's going is diagonal, this sort of diagonal. It's tilted in this direction, and this is straight. A straight diagonal has a very slight change in direction here, and it continues just with a little bit of a curve there. Continues in a straight diagonal, and the diagonal has changed position very slightly. Here the diagonal changes position a little bit more, and it's moving straight to about right here, and then the movement takes on a curve, a very slight curve, and it's curving from one diagonal to a straight, and then it changes directions again. It's a very slight little curve there. Changes direction again in this direction, in this diagonal, in a straight movement. And you continue to examine your boundaries of your shapes with just that kind of language, looking for the direction and the movement. The kind of direction. Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it one of our diagonals? And is it curved or straight? Is the kind of movement curved or straight? When you look for those things, rather than trying to make it look like a mountain, then you're going to do a painting or a drawing that catches what that boundary is really doing and how the eye is really seeing it. The other thing that determines what our eyes will do is the characteristic of that edge. Look at this edge right back here. You can barely see. We know that the atmosphere is what causes us to see things get lighter as they go into the distance, if they do. And when you see something like a shape way in the distance here, if you look at the edge, you almost can't see it at all. There are two reasons for that. One is that the value of the shape itself and the value of the sky are almost the same value. So that edge is almost lost. And that's one of the characteristics. Some edges do get lost. Now, we might be able to see that a little bit better in the clouds right up here, as we see the values of what we can see in the clouds here. We can see the values gradating where we don't really see an edge. And that is called a lost edge. When the edges of the shapes are either so much alike in value that we can't see the difference, or if they're gradating in value, such as we see right here, this very slight gradation of value and color. So the gradation might be in color as well, but we can't see an edge because of how one shape is gradating, or how the edge of one shape is gradating into the other. That is a lost edge. And sometimes, or a lot of the times in fact, instead of the edge being totally lost, we will see it soft. And that means that it's really not very, very sharp. So the edges of shapes or boundaries will vary. Some will be very, very sharp. Some will be very slightly softened, as you watch what's happening to this edge. Some will appear very soft. This is just an example right here. And then, as I explained earlier, some will be so gradated, one edge, the edge of one shape into the edge of another, that we can't detect where the edge actually is. So an edge can be so gradated we don't see it, or an edge can be so much the same value as the shape next to it that we can't see it. Now, those have names. We've put labels on those kinds of edges. I've already talked about the lost edge. That's the label we put on the edge you can't detect, when the very, very soft edge is simply labeled soft edge. And that can vary in degrees of softness. And then the edge that's just barely softened has a couple of names. Some people call that a firm edge. I call that the sfumata edge. And a lot of my teachers call that the sfumata edge. And that term goes way back to Leonardo, when he discovered that just by barely softening edges, you could create the sense of space around images. Then there's the very, very sharp edge I showed you earlier. Now, what does the eye do? What does your eye do when it encounters one of these edges? Well, when our eyes encounter a lost edge, they just flow right through it. When they encounter a soft edge, pause and keep going. When they encounter a sfumata edge, they might stop for a moment. But when they encounter a sharp edge, the eyes stop and then go. So edges are sort of like traffic signs for the eyes. There's one other thing I want to call your attention to, and that is to the texture of an edge. Now, we think of textures as varying from smooth through all kinds of description. I've heard textures defined as jagged. I've heard them defined as rough, grainy, all those kinds of things. But still, those textures can vary and will vary in degrees of softness, no matter whether the texture is smooth or whether it's very rough. The only difference that I notice is that a textured edge will totally disappear when it becomes a lost edge. But they're going to behave pretty much the same way regardless of what the texture of the edge is. Smooth or some degree of really, really, really busy texture. Let's stop here now and let you ask your questions. Okay, I'm ready to go, right? Okay, folks, did that stimulate any questions? If it did, ask those questions now and we'll get a little discussion going. You know, when I was putting this together, and we had just finished a workshop about edges, and mainly it was focused more on the character of edges than it was the direction and movement of edges. But I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking, you know, people haven't always been as aware of what edges do in a painting. I was thinking also about how our awareness in painting and in all other things too, this is true, I think, in probably every field, the awareness has evolved over time, over centuries. When you think about people who lived in the Middle Ages, well, all kinds of things going on in our world in various times in history. But during the Middle Ages, the artwork, and between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, before the Renaissance, pre-Renaissance, art was, well, I won't go into the whole reason of all of it. What I want to observe for you, that people looked at images and painted images flat. They weren't really conscious. Well, also the materials didn't really give them the ability as the same abilities that our materials give us today. But their vision, they were looking more at images as images, and what we see are not necessarily what they saw, but representation of images. And of course, most of the images are icons in the Middle Ages, and then as history goes on, the images become more representation of historical events and mythological ideas, mythological stories, and then, you know, evolved into including people. So that at that up until about in fact, up until Leonardo's time, the edges were all very sharp. If you look back in you actually could get on the internet and Google for art in the, say, 14th, 13th, 14th century. And you will see that most of it is religious art, but the images are very flat. So we don't see the edges of the images are relatively sharp. And you don't see the images, you see some attempt as we get further on into history, in the timeline of history, you'll see some attempt at making the images three-dimensional, or trying to render what the artist was seeing in terms of gradation in the image, but we still see them flat. And Leonardo, as far as we know, this is in the Western evolution, the Western Renaissance, Leonardo, of course, the genius as he was, he was way ahead of his time as far as the way he was able to see and perceive images. And he discovered that just by very softening, very subtly, not to the great extent, but by very subtly softening the edges or merging the edges of images, would make them appear less flat, more three-dimensional. And another way to say that would be to make them appear as if we feel the space around them, whereas in earlier images they all seem sort of like two-dimensional. They seem more two-dimensional than they do three-dimensional. I'm talking in all kinds of generalities here. You would a lot of people have done an entire doctoral study on those eras, and I'm not trying to go there. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how the vision of humans has evolved over time. And when I say vision, I mean both the eyesight, how the eye perceives, the depth with which the eye perceives, and the characteristics of images that the eye is capable of perceiving and noticing relationships of images, noticing how images can change in space as they move, as the further the image is from the observer in space, the softer the edges seem to get, and depending upon the atmospheric particles, the softer those edges begin to be. Terry asked here, so are textures defined more by edges and light? Textures themselves, we think of textures as overall smoothness to business. I like to say busyness, because textures include all sorts of little patterns, and I like to think of them as their degree of busyness, activity. So we think of the term texture as referring to beginning at smooth. A lot of people just say it's textured. Something is textured, and they mean by that it feels rough rather than smooth. But we visually, in the visual language, we usually include smooth as a beginning point for a texture that doesn't have any variations in it, but it simply moves smoothly without any interruptions. And then the edges of a textured shape is what I was talking about there, that when you have a textured shape, you have a textured shape in cat's fur, for example, very soft type textured shape. A cactus edge, if you're looking at a cactus plant, the edge of the cactus will have a textured shape. Certain leaves that we look at on trees that have that zigzag, like behind me right here, see, this leaf has a textured edge. Now in this case the edge is textured, but the inside is smoother. So see, we can't say that texture itself is just um, defined by the edges, because the texture will be it can be let me see if let me get this right now. It can be the result of the of this overall shape as being textured, and then the edges of that shape will be textured according to where the shape's texture is. And you can think about all kinds of things like bark that has texture, or if you just visually, if you look at bunches of leaves, the entire bunch of leaves has visual texture. So what we mean by the texture of edges is broken edges, edges that are not smooth, but somewhat broken in some way, or interrupted or varied in some way. And so then from the point of view of light, how the light shines on those, or the kind of light and the environment in which the image exists will reveal that texture to the degree, I'll say that another way, to the degree that the two are lit, and therefore the kind of value that the texture is within will reveal it. Now, if you look right here behind me, this is a you may call it an interrupted edge or a broken edge. The texture that get my hand over here so I can follow a little bit better. You see right along that edge, you see that edge, the edge of that leaf is a broken edge, and it's textured and it's moving in. The movement within that is overall a sort of a curved movement. If I can make my hand go there, let's try this figure. I get my images backwards here, so I have a hard time translating that. But you can see, I'll just point at it. You can see the overall movement of that leaf, the edge of that leaf is curved, but within that curve there is straight. There are straight movements that are moving in various directions. Tiny straight movements that are moving in various directions, zigzagging, the sort of zigzagging, and that's creating a textured edge. Now, if the background, this is a very pretty strongly lit image here. If the background were very dark, then that edge would appear to us very sharp. If the camera is in focus. Now, when we're looking at photographs, we have to depend upon the focus of the camera, because the focus of the camera can affect the image we're looking at when we're looking at a photograph. But if that were very black, say black or nearly black, that would appear sharper. But because the values are closer, it's a closer value contrast, then they don't appear quite as sharp. So the closer the values are from the outside, from an edge within, let me put it this way, when a shape's edge, and then the shape's environment, and what the stuff around that is its environment. Well, the shape's edge is in value, in closer range of value, it won't appear quite as sharp as it does when we have a stronger value contrast. And that's the way the value affects the edges. So the value relationship will give us that sense of it being either very sharp or maybe not quite so sharp. So that it kind of lives on a continuum that I pointed this out in the workshop. All edges, how we interpret the edges, could be extremely sharp, and then they could vary in their sharpness. So there's not a cut and dry way of seeing edges or perceiving edges, because there is that continuum. But there is our eyes will perceive some edges as sharper as our eyes perceive other edges, and our eyes will perceive some edges as just blurred, and when they're really just look blurred, they're very soft. And then when the edge totally disappears, that's when we call it a lost edge. In other words, if it's so gradated, so blurred, it's blurred into gradation, so is so much that we can't see it anymore, then that's lost. And so we distinguish these things with labels in order to study them as artists, in order to be aware of how we're translating those edges, how we're interpreting those edges in our paintings. So Maggie says she's a plant nerd. Or, you know, a plant nerd would call that a serrated edge. Yeah, there you go. Yay, Roger, thanks.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Welcome.
Huh?
Welcome.
Yeah. That's one of those the characteristics. You're right. People have there are all kinds of adjectives that describe edges that are not smooth, and so there's a whole list of them. And when I was in school, I refer to those days very fondly, but very quite a bit of distance between now and when I was in school. Distance, time and distance, really. Anyway, the language of describing edges hadn't gotten as clear, or at least it wasn't as clear to me as a student. So an edge was either, the character of an edge was either rough or soft, or rough or smooth, or rough. And the rough business would then get into sometimes zigzag, or we call it jagged, or we would call it serrated. I don't remember that as being part of it, but that would certainly describe what we're looking at there. So all kinds of words that I've found that it's a lot easier to understand if you just think of those edges as being textured, and rather than smooth and textured. And textured means, I want you to throw this a little bit in. If you think about a texture, you can't see a texture without value, without value variation and value contrast. So the way we see texture is just a whole bunch of little value contrasts, and how those little shapes that create those value contrasts are shaped, or how those little divisions, little borders, little shaped boundaries, how those are shaped, and what they are doing determines that texture. And whether we see it in the texture, we can see the texture because of where the light shines on it. So that's a fun thing to think about. But I think the whole point here is it's not to get so caught up in trying to make our images look like we're trying to make them appear the way our eyes see them. And we oftentimes will just be trying to get it right. How many times have I heard students say that to me? I just wanted to get it looking right. I just want to get it right. I just want to make it look like that cat, or I want to make it look like that cow, or something like that. Well, that's true, you do, but it's much more difficult to get it looking like what you're looking at when you're just focusing on the fact of the thing you're looking at. But if you're looking at what makes it look the way it does, and the character of edges is certainly one thing that makes your image appear to your eyes the way it does. When you're exploring the outside and the inside of those shapes, the shapes that make the thing appear to you the way it appears to you, when you're exploring specifically for where those edges are going and how they're moving. Are they moving straight? Or are they moving curved? Isn't that interesting that we only have two ways that we can move? That movement can only go in one of two ways, and it's a combination of those that create different kinds of movement. I mean, if you have a spiral, you just got a sequence of curves. Or you've got straight, and these go in various directions. And we've only got 3 categories of directions that things can move in. So if you break it down like that, you start looking for which way is it going, where is it? And therefore you realize that a shape has movement. A shape has visual movement. and our eyes are following it, and that's what's causing it to move, or causing the movement. Well, the movement is there, the visual movement is there, but when we make that visual movement, we see our hand move, and when our hand is moving, then we're creating the movement that we see in that visual image. So, I mean, all that stuff is very fascinating when you start just looking at the world in those terms of how images appear to your eyes versus the fact that it's just that image. You know, I want to make that person look the way she does. I want to catch the expression. Well, then explore the edges. Explore the direction in which those edges go. A lot of times I say to students who are doing portrait work, watch for the angle. That's what I'm talking about. The angle is always the direction. Which ways are those angles going? And so that has to do with what the edge is doing. And so that sort of thing. So it's a really fascinating world when you're approaching it that way. Another thing that's very interesting for me is that as art started moving away from images, okay, I'm talking about the Western, I'm talking about the overall Western world now, and the way in the Western world, remember during the post-Impressionism period, that we had the Impressionism period, and then that was when artists began to be less concerned about the image itself and more concerned about what the light was doing to the image. And then as time moved on, artists began to explore more and more about what was happening on the surface of the canvas. But what's amazing is that even though the image itself, for a period of time there, I'm chasing rabbits in between sentences here, but during that period of time in our history, when abstraction and abstract expressionism, let's put those two together. There was an abstract movement that was more about structure, and the expressionistic movement, which is more about expression, and then it became abstract expressionism, which was both putting together. Well, they weren't concerned about, you might see images there as a part of what was going on the canvas, but you wouldn't see images for themselves. But you know what was there? Edges. What was there was directional movement, or was the movement of edges. You can't put a brushstroke down without creating edges. Even a line is, if you want to get really nerdy about that, even the line is an edge of a very thin shape, or has two edges, because if it didn't have two sides, we probably wouldn't be able to see it. Well, that really does get down to nitty-gritty, doesn't it? But the abstraction is about what's happening on the canvas. And so the visual language for how an abstraction is done is the same visual language that we use to do representational painting, or if you want to call it realistic painting. There's no difference in the language. The only difference is the intent, what the artist's goal is, what the artist is working with, what the artist is more concerned with as far as the expression of the painting goes. So that's the reason I like to teach painting from the point of view of composition. And all the things, because what I'm talking about, what we were studying there, is all about how these things work, how they work together, what they do when they hit the canvas, and then you begin to see this visual stuff going on. Then what is that doing, and how is one thing that you do on the canvas affecting another thing that you put on the canvas? And when you put two things on the canvas, how those two things are affecting each other, and on and on and on as you're developing a painting. The language doesn't change. The visual language doesn't change. Just as in music, the visual, the what we are dealing with as far as notes, the way we read music. This is again still in the Western world. The way we read music, or the way we hear music, the structure doesn't change. The structural elements, I should say, of music don't change. The modes change, and the interpretations, and all those kinds of things. But the actual things that structure, or the structural elements that we're dealing with, don't change. They're communicating with the same elements, but they're using them in a much different way. Same thing is true in the painting world. The same thing, if you think about all the arts, that same thing is true as that. In fact, the overall intent in art, the overall things, a lot of the overall things are universal. The rhythm, unity, order, all those kinds of things. And so then when we study what those things do to each other, that then gives us more insight into how they work and how they can make our paintings work better. And the boundaries of shapes, like we call them, the boundaries of shapes. A shape cannot exist without a boundary. Think about it. And the boundary is created by the edges, of course, and then the kind of edge, what the edge is doing, creates the way we see it. And that will vary. That's another fun thing too. Say you take the image behind me still, and if we put a different kind of light on that, let's say of course this image is a photograph. Let's say if you take the image itself and you put a different kind of light on it, or even if you put a different kind of light on it and then you change your position, you're going to see those edges doing something different. And so the light itself, which a lot of people, is what value is all about. Value is the way we, it's degree of light and dark, degrees of light and dark. And so the way we use value, the way we see value, we see the light causing what value does and the dark causing what value does. We see edges existing in those surroundings of light or dark, and or light and or dark, and both sometimes. That affects the way we're going to see the edges. So all these things work together. And I think one thing that really has puzzled me is why it is that so often I'm watching, and I've got to be careful here because I don't mean to be critical. In one sense, it sounds critical when I say something like this. But a lot of times I go and watch what other people are doing on YouTube, what other artists, painters, teachers, whatever, are doing on YouTube. Because I'm interested in what people are being exposed to. I'm interested in the way that painting is being taught, what's being emphasized. And what I see a lot of times is value is talked about in such a way that it's not used to refer to what light and shadow are doing. I mean, light and shadow may be mentioned, but value itself, the varying values and whatever, so often are just sort of talked about in a sense about, oh, this needs to be darker, this needs to be lighter, and that sort of thing. But the light source doesn't get in, and what the light source is doing to us doesn't enter into it. And that does affect so much the way we, can we say, it affects so much the way we interpret, where we interpret images in our paintings, about how, if we're working representational or realistically, how that light, what that light is doing, and what that light is doing to the edges, causing them to appear the way we do. Another thing about the edges that I think you might try now, just look for, because it's just, these things are fascinating, and they can really feed the artist. It's what I call feed the artist, when we're learning things about the visual world in whatever way we're learning about it. That is to just focus your attention. Say, if you're looking at, you can look in the distance. If you're outside, you're looking into the distance. And especially if you're in an area where you have lots of distance. Now, here we have mountain ranges. And there's some places where we can see layers of mountain ranges. But in front, we will normally see, let me say normally, but we can position ourselves so that in front we can see there might be a tree, a complete tree, and we see the edges of that tree, and we can see clearly at the edges of that tree. And then we will see ahead of us groups of trees that then the edges of the individual trees lose their characteristics too. No, let's say they join their characteristics with the edges of other trees. And so what we'll see for groups that are closer to us, we'll see more differentiation in the edges. We will see them zigzagging, and then because we'll be closer to them, we can see the tops of the trees. We can still see something of the textures of the edges that groups of trees are making. And then maybe the next layer behind us, we might see that those edges a little more blurred, just a little less defined. And behind that, even less defined. And then by the time, just like I was showing you in that, pardon me, I talk too fast. Like I showed you in the video, in how as the atmospheric particles, as the images are getting further and further in distance, then those edges redefine themselves with each layer of mountains. As they're moving in the distance, the edges redefine themselves, and they'll get less defined and less defined. Or you might find that in your area they may be behaving a little differently, and they may behave a little differently at different times of day. So it's a good thing to observe. So I'm wondering, sorry about that. Sometimes I get this habit of, this thing. If I start talking about something too fast, I end up getting a tickle in my throat, and I'll start coughing, and then here I am on YouTube coughing in your face. So I'm wondering, are there other questions? I guess not. Well, let me take this time to remind you again. I reminded you at the beginning, all of you at the beginning, I reminded you of things that we have going on. And of course, all of you are aware of our weekly quick tips. How many quick tips do we have now? 500 and how many? Huh?
That have been published, 548, I think, 49.
But, well, almost 550. Yeah. So that's a lot of quick tips for such a little thing as painting, isn't it? But those quick tips, I've been getting some really, heartwarming comments from people lately. I've been getting some emails from people who tell me that they have learned everything they know about painting from our quick tips. Now that to me is so heartwarming, because it tells me that our intent for the quick tips is working, so that you can find an answer just about any kind of technical question you have. And when we first started doing these video lessons, we first started doing all this video stuff. It was about 2015, was it, Roger?
Yes.
2015. That was what, 10 years ago? That's been going for a while, hasn't it? Well, we first started just doing the lessons that you find on the lessons website Oh, you're showing some different kinds of textures. Wonderful. Anyway, so, but when we made this decision that I would use the lessons and the longer videos. Those lessons are each an hour, at least an hour long. I made the decision that we'd use those lessons to delve deep into how the principles of painting work, how the tools of painting work, how you can compose your paintings and put them together, what you can do with color, what you can do with textures, what you can do with edges, all those things. But then we decided that we would use the quick tips themselves for technical stuff, how the brush works with, and mainly, well, if you know, some of the quick tips a lot of them are with oil. That's because it's easier to show something in oil than it is in watercolor, because the drying time of watercolor. We have some watercolor quick tips, and we have a few pastel quick tips there too. But we decided to let the quick tips be about techniques, things that are the technical part of painting. And maybe work some of the composing stuff into it too, is how that worked out. And then the workshop started, and that got into very deeper and deeper and deeper stuff. But we've kept those quick tips going along with the workshops, and then development of, we put the academy up. It's about 4 years old now, I think, 3 or 4 years old. We started the academy for the full length courses for those that really want to get into how things work, delve into the real nitty gritty of how the visual world works, how all the ways that you can use color, how color behaves and why it behaves at what way it does, and what you can do with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we got all those things working together there. And all that, one thing that had sort of concerned me all these years is how do we put all this together? How do we make all this available in one spot? And then comes Substack. Well, Substack's been going a lot longer, but I only discovered Substack recently. And I think it's been, was it early summer or spring, I decided to set up Substack for everything we do. And so, oh, look, Hugh is given 20 memberships again. Bless you, Hugh. Bless you for that. Terry says what?
Terry's and Renee's response about the quick tips.
Okay, Terry says the quick tips drew me in. Renee says quick tips are the gateway. Yes. And that's a good way to say it, Renee. The gateway. Quick tips are the gateway. And you can choose to go either towards the lessons or towards the courses, or maybe both, and the workshops. All that stuff is there. Well, that's why I am so excited about Substack, because it allows us now to have everything in one place, so that you can go to the Substack page and get access to everything we do, and even go back and especially send those newsletters out every Saturday. And those of you who are YouTubers, if you haven't discovered the newsletters yet, go to one of our sites and sign up, because every Saturday morning you will receive what I call the Saturday morning art thoughts. Is that what I call it? Saturday morning art thoughts. And that is some little, I usually try to think of it as some little gem about the way composing works, or sometimes it's about the life of an artist, or sometimes it's about art itself. On Saturday mornings, every Saturday morning I send those out to our newsletter subscribers, and you can subscribe from the Academy. Look up in the menu of the Academy. It's DianneMizeAcademy.com, or you can subscribe from the website DianneMize.com. It's in the menu. Subscribe to Dianne's newsletter, or get Dianne's communications. I don't know what it says, but it's all there. And you can also subscribe from Substack. And so if you are not already a newsletter subscriber, go subscribe, so that you'll be getting those Saturday morning things every time as well. And you'll also get every Wednesday we publish a new quick tip. I'm still doing it. Every Wednesday a new quick tip. Every Saturday get you those Saturday morning art thoughts. And something new now as a result of Substack. So we have two kinds of memberships. We have your memberships here on YouTube, the Studio Insiders. That gets you the members are called studio insiders, and it's the members who ask the questions and make the comments. And then on Substack, there's another kind of membership. Now you may think, well, we're money grabbing. What we're not. We're just trying to keep the lights on. But on Substack, it has its own individual membership, and that gives you. I'm still working on the perks for members there, but right now and for the past several weeks, even past couple of months, I guess now by now, every Sunday morning, the Substack people get what I call the Sunday morning scoops. That's a video. It's usually a short video, but it's usually just a video kind of like the one we had at the beginning of the session here. Just taking one idea, exploring that idea with you, what its ramifications are, get you started in thinking about that idea. So that's sort of a rundown. Did I leave anything out, Roger? The workshops.
The workshops is
going
well.
Yeah, workshops are going well. Workshops every month. You can find out about the workshops, always find out about the workshops from Substack as well as from the Academy. So every month we run a new workshop, and that is a wonderful thing. We take a concept and we explore the dickens out of it, and it usually has surprises in it. Things that you wouldn't have thought of perhaps before. One way to open up the world of painting for you and the world of visual art for you. And then, so it's not just, we will have a 4-hour session for the workshops where we have 4 video lessons already recorded, and we have the recorded lesson and then a question and answer period, another quarter lesson, and so on. That goes in that pattern. The next day we have what we call study hall. That's where you can log on and ask questions about anything you didn't understand. Then you have a 2-week period to do to then practice what I taught you during the workshop into your own composition, your own painting. And then we have what we call student review. Now that is such a wonderful thing because it's not a critique, it's students sharing with each other how they went about solving the problem, and they ask each other questions. And the students themselves have told me that they learn so much from each other. And that, of course, absolutely delights me, because learning, as long as people are learning, especially when they're learning from each other, it just makes me a happy camper. All right. So people are chiming in, beginning to thanking Hugh for that gift, and we certainly appreciate it. So, okay, folks, that's it for today. We're going to have next month's will be probably on the 4th Sunday again. I have to talk to you about that one. So I guess you can just depend that you know that these chats are going to happen on either the 3rd or the 4th Sunday of every month, and we'll let you know from chat to chat which one that's going to be, because we found that just trying to keep them on one or the other doesn't always work with the holidays and things like that. So thank you all for joining us. Go out and experience the world of art in new ways, and especially the way you experience edges. So bye-bye for now.